My name is Colonel Reagan Doyle. I'm 36 years old, a decorated officer with the Distinguished Service Cross, and a combat strategist trained in asymmetric warfare. But today, none of that mattered. Because today, I was just a name nobody remembered, not even my father. I stepped onto the SEAL qualification range at Camp Redstone. The air was dense with the scent of gunpowder and oil. Rows of camouflage bodies stood around, casually leaning on crates of ammunition or checking scopes. They were all men, broad-shouldered, sun-worn, loud, and all SEALs. And then, I saw him. Colonel Frank Doyle, my father, towering, clean-shaven, decorated chest, unshakable stance. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing as he scanned the figure walking in me. He cocked his head. "And you are," he snapped with the same cold detachment he'd used my entire childhood. I stood still, Reagan Doyle, his jaw clenched. His eyes didn't flicker, not a hint of recognition. Before I could breathe, a man next to him, a SEAL commander in black fatigues, laughed under his breath. "You don't belong here." The others picked it up. Chuckles rolled through the range like gunfire. They didn't know who I was. Their laughter stabbed like bayonets. But I didn't say a word. I just turned my head to the weapon rack. Rows of rifles gleamed under the morning sun, M4s, MK18s, and tucked at the end an old M14, a beast of a rifle, my favorite. I walked past their sneers, past the scoffs and whispers. I picked it up, and the laughter stopped just for a moment. I didn't need to warm up. I didn't need to stretch. My fingers remembered. My body remembered. I loaded the mag with swift precision. My hands moved like I was back in Fallujah, like I was back with SEAL Team 3 under cover of night. None of them knew that I'd been embedded with them during Operation Black Lantern. None of them knew I'd been the one coordinating their exfil while dragging a wounded captain under enemy fire. I took my stance, left foot forward, elbow locked, chin steady. One breath, in, hold, trigger pressure, boom. The round sliced the air, center, dead center. Another breath, in, boom. A playing card exploded in half on the edge of the target stand. Silence, pure, perfect silence. No one said a word. I stepped back, reset the bolt, and set the rifle down. That was when someone whispered she just broke Larson's record. I turned slightly, letting my sleeve slide down. My tattoo caught the light, the three-pronged raven of the Strategic Ghost Unit. Classified, disavowed. Untraceable unless you knew. Their silence wasn't just disbelief anymore. It was fear, wonder, awe. I didn't speak. Not a single word. Because when men like that laugh at you, the best way to answer is not with noise, but with numbers, accuracy, proof. I turned and walked past them, leaving only a trail of stunned eyes and trembling pride behind me. My father didn't move. He stood frozen. His eyes followed me, but they couldn't place me. Colonel Frank Doyle, hero of the Balkan Push, architect of the SEAL Training Reform Act, and the man who once told his daughter she wasn't strong enough to climb a rope, let alone wear the uniform. The man who hadn't spoken my name in nearly a decade. But now the silence screamed. He couldn't look away. And neither could the others. She just beat SEAL's top record. Who is she? The words circled around me like ghosts, and they had no idea. They didn't know I was the operative who infiltrated the Kabul sleeper cell. They didn't know I was the mind behind Operation Icefall in the Arctic. They didn't know that every record in their dusty SEAL range had already been shattered by me years ago under a different name. They didn't know because actually I was never supposed to exist. Not to them, not to him. And maybe in that moment I understood something cruel but clear. You don't need to be accepted to be exceptional. You don't need to be remembered to be respected. You just need to deliver when it counts. I didn't look back. I walked straight off the range past the stunned, the small-minded, and the suddenly silent. I left behind the doubt, the history, and the father who'd chosen legacy over blood. And I walked into the truth I'd been carrying my whole life. Some names are only remembered when they're carved into stone. Others are whispered when no one dares to speak aloud. Mine was both. Colonel Reagan Doyle, daughter of the man who forgot me, breaker of every single SEAL record, and the shadow they never saw coming. I was never the chosen one. In the Doyle household, everything revolved around Connor, my older brother, the golden boy, the heir to my father's dream. Dad used to call him the next Admiral Doyle before Connor even learned to swim. His room was filled with naval posters, medals from youth shooting competitions, and photographs of him shaking hands with retired SEALs. Mine was tucked at the end of the hall, quiet, no visitors, no expectations. Mom was the only one who saw me, really saw me. She'd brush my hair in the kitchen and whisper, "You're the steady one, Rhea, the strong one." But when I turned 12, she got sick. And fast. Within months, she was gone. After that, it was like I disappeared too. Dad buried himself in work. Connor's Annapolis prep classes became the new religion. Our dinner table became a briefing room. Discussions were no longer about family. They were about strategy, legacy, ambition. I ate in silence. I studied alone. I trained in secret. While Connor was praised for every passable test, I aced my exams and tucked the papers into drawers. When he got a participation ribbon, it went on the fridge. When I won first place in district track, no one came to the meet. I learned to stop hoping for applause, or even acknowledgement. I started waking up early to run before anyone was up. I taught myself to shoot with a BB gun in the woods behind our house using soda cans and pine cones as targets. I shadowed Dad's old training manuals, memorizing drills I wasn't allowed to learn. By 16, I could lift more than Connor. By 17, I'd hacked together a training regimen more brutal than his SEAL prep program. But in Dad's eyes, I was still invisible. When Connor applied to Annapolis, the entire house held its breath. He was rejected. The first time, then the second, then the third. And still Dad said, "Don't worry, son. It's political. They'll see your potential soon." When I quietly applied to the military academy on my own, with no support, no recommendation from Dad, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't expect anything. I just tried. I got in, top percentile, full merit. I left the acceptance letter on the kitchen table one morning. No one said a word. Dad moved it aside like it was a catalog. Connor didn't even glance. There was no congratulations. No, "We're proud of you." And so I packed my bag in silence. I hugged no one. No one saw me out the door. But that day, stepping onto the cold steel steps of the academy bus, I made a vow, quiet, private, but eternal. If they wouldn't see me now, they'd damn well see me later. Not because I needed their praise, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I was never the lesser Doyle, just the one they underestimated. I never told anyone when I enlisted. Not Dad, not Connor, not even the few people who claimed to be my friends. At the recruitment office, when they asked for a preferred call sign, I wrote R. Doyle, no first name, just the initial. I wanted to disappear in plain sight. Not out of shame, no, never that. But because anonymity was my only shield. Being the daughter of Colonel Frank Doyle came with too many questions, too many assumptions. I didn't want doors opened for me. And I sure as hell didn't want them closed because of him either. I went through training with the same intensity I'd built into myself for years. 0 complaints, 0 hesitation. I excelled in land navigation, hand-to-hand combat, and precision marksmanship. The instructors noticed, quietly. No praise, no spotlight, just a nod here, a longer glance there. After my final qualifying exam, one of them pulled me aside. "We're assembling a classified team. Off-grid. Deep intel. You'll need to vanish." I didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." And just like that, I disappeared from every record my father might have ever found. My first mission was in Colombia. We were tasked with locating a POW believed dead for over a year. While others scanned the jungle through drones, I was crawling on my belly through red soil, counting the number of guards, tracking movement patterns, memorizing dialects. We got the soldier out. Not one casualty. Mission classified. A month later in Myanmar, I led a nighttime infiltration into a cartel-run zone. We extracted an informant who had gone dark. He was being tortured. I carried him out myself 6 miles through swamp. I dislocated my shoulder midway. Didn't tell anyone until after. They started calling me the ghost. Not because I was quiet, though I was. Not because I didn't smile, though I rarely did. But because I could move through hell and leave nothing behind. No traces, no names. My face never showed up on official mission logs. My full name never appeared in briefings. Even my teammates knew only what I gave them, R. Doyle. I lived like that for years, floating between war zones, safe houses, and the shadows of geopolitical secrets. The fewer people who knew me, the safer we all were. Some nights I dreamed of calling home, just once, just to say, "Dad, I'm doing something that matters." But then I'd wake up in a different country with a new directive, and that feeling would pass. Silence became a second skin. Camouflage wasn't just a uniform, it was a lifestyle. And in that silence and that invisibility, I found a strange kind of peace. Because while Connor sat in our father's living room, still trying to prove he was worthy, I was already living the life they never imagined I could survive. And I was thriving. I never sought rank or medals, but they came anyway, quietly. Each time my name was listed as R. Doyle, even the Distinguished Service Cross came in a sealed envelope, no ceremony, no press. That's how I wanted it. Because the moment I became visible again, everything would change. And I wasn't ready. Not yet. Let them think I was a shadow. Let them think I didn't belong. I was building something bigger than recognition. I was building a truth too strong to stay hidden forever. They called it a celebration of legacy. The invitation came through official channels, a formal event at the U.S. Military Academy, where General Frank Doyle would be delivering a keynote on leadership, legacy, and loyalty. I had just come back from an op in northern Syria, my ribs still bruised from a rooftop fall. I could have ignored the invite, but something, maybe pride, maybe masochism, pulled me there. I wore a dark suit, civilian clothes, hair tucked tight, no ribbons, no insignia, no trace of rank. Just R. Doyle blending into the crowd like always. The hall was packed. Brass glinted from the shoulders of cadets, commanders, and old generals. The press lined the back wall. The Academy's honor choir had just finished when my father stepped onto the stage. He looked the same. Hard jaw, steely gaze, back straight as a flagpole. The crowd applauded. I didn't. He launched into his speech with the ease of a man used to applause. He talked about values, duty, sacrifice. He told stories from Fallujah, Ramadi, Kabul. I knew most of them. I'd read the after-action reports. Some I had even cross-referenced for missions of my own. Then midway through the speech, he said it. "I have one child," he announced. "One son, Connor. A man I raised with the values of discipline, service, and honor." I didn't blink, but my body stiffened. Around me, a few heads nodded in admiration. Someone behind me whispered, "Connor Doyle's got big boots to fill." And all I could do was breathe slow and silent, because rage is loud, but control is lethal. One son. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was deliberate, rehearsed. He was rewriting the record, erasing me with clarity and pride. The same man who once scolded me for being too sensitive, who said girls didn't belong in the dirt or behind rifles, who never attended my science fairs or track meets, was now standing on a stage drenched in applause and claiming I never existed. I had fought in jungles and deserts, in cities lit by mortar fire and villages scarred by cartel wars. I had pulled men out of ditches and carried their secrets through enemy lines. And yet in his eyes, I was still nothing. Connor had never served a day. He'd washed out of Annapolis 3 times. He spent more time on LinkedIn than he ever did in a barracks. But to Dad, he was the Doyle legacy. And me, just air. Silent, invisible, unworthy. I don't remember leaving the auditorium. Only the echo of that one line bouncing against my ribs. One son. Later that night, I sat in my rental car in a motel parking lot off Highway 87. Still in that dark suit. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Military Times General Frank Doyle, honored for family military tradition. Attached was a photo, Dad grinning, Connor awkward in a blazer, a caption beneath father and son. That was the moment I realized something irrevocable. It wasn't just that he didn't see me, it was that he didn't want me seen. My father wasn't just neglectful, he was willfully erasing me. And in doing so, he lit a fire, not of vengeance, but of clarity. I had been hiding my identity to protect Mission's live strategy, but now that same cloak of secrecy was shielding his lie. And I was done letting him benefit from my silence. He wanted a legacy. He was about to see what one looked like, not in a staged photograph, but in truth carved out of sacrifice, grit, and everything he chose to ignore. I didn't sleep that night. After watching my father stand on that stage and erase me with a smile, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of that cheap motel room outside West Point, the buzzing neon sign flickering through the blinds. My heart was steady, my breath calm, but my mind, it was on fire. I had been silent for too long. That silence had protected missions, yes, but it had also protected him. I didn't care about public recognition. I never had. But there was one thing I wouldn't tolerate: a legacy built on lies with my name buried beneath it. So I made a decision. The following morning, I sat at the edge of the motel bed and opened my encrypted laptop. I typed for hours detailing every mission I had ever led: cross-border extractions, covert hostage rescues, the destruction of a fentanyl superlab, run by paramilitary mercenaries in the Afghan mountains. Each operation was listed by date, location, team involvement, and classified outcome. I attached photographic evidence, encrypted video logs, voice recordings from command briefings where my voice low, and even gave final green lights. I ended the report with one-line service history of R. Doyle, U.S. Army Intelligence Command request for Medal of Honor consideration under true identity, Colonel Reagan Doyle. Then I included one final attachment, my official military ID issued just 3 weeks earlier during a reclassification process, bearing my full name, my rank, my clearance level. There was no more hiding. I submitted the report directly to the Pentagon through official encrypted lines to the Honors and Awards Evaluation Division. I waited. 3 weeks passed, then 5, then 7. Silence. On the 8th week, I received a formal letter. Not a call, not a meeting, a letter. It began with bureaucratic niceties. We appreciate your service. Your record reflects commendable leadership. The review process is ongoing. But the next paragraph made my blood run cold. After review, your file has been withdrawn from consideration for the Medal of Honor on grounds of insufficient documentation regarding battlefield recognition and public mission confirmation. The recommendation was not endorsed by the supervising general officer. The name signed at the bottom, General Frank Doyle. My father, he had reviewed the Medal of Honor list that year, and he had chosen to strike me off. He was the supervising general officer. He had the power, and he used it. He claimed that my actions were not officially acknowledged in the public record, which was true because he had helped design the very system that buried those missions. But now, even with evidence, with names and footage and after-action logs, he was playing gatekeeper again. The Medal of Honor wasn't just a ribbon. It was a truth etched in bronze that said this happened, that what I'd done, what I'd survived was real, and he was denying it. He was erasing me twice, once as a daughter, now as a soldier. And in that moment, a clarity hit me that I've never forgotten. I had nothing left to lose. Not a name, not a family, not a future under his shadow. Only one thing remained: justice, not revenge. I wasn't that naive. I knew how this system worked, how men like him built walls of silence around themselves, ironclad reputations that no whisper could penetrate. But this wasn't a whisper anymore. It was time to speak. I filed a formal appeal. Not through the military, but through Congress. A rarely used provision allowed any service member denied award consideration to petition a joint military review board under the Defense Authorization Act. It was a long shot. No one had tried it in years, but I didn't care. I attached the entire report, again cleaner this time, with affidavits from fellow operators, with satellite data, with unreleased drone footage showing my silhouette moving through a hostage site under fire, dragging 3 prisoners to safety, taking a bullet in the leg and not stopping. And I submitted one final statement, typed with brutal precision: I am Colonel Reagan Doyle. I have led 27 successful Black Ops missions under the designation R. Doyle. I have bled and served with distinction. My actions were classified not to protect me, but to protect politics. I now speak because silence is no longer service. It is complicity. I request public acknowledgement not for glory, but for the truth. Weeks passed, but this time the silence was different. It was active, restless, buzzing with pressure. A congressional staffer reached out under a private number. We've received your petition. We're initiating a bipartisan inquiry. I hung up and breathed deep and steady, not from relief, from resolve, because now it had begun. And this time, my father couldn't erase me behind closed doors. I sat at the kitchen table of my tiny apartment in Alexandria, Virginia, long after midnight. The only light came from the glow of my laptop screen, casting sharp shadows across the stacks of redacted reports, declassified intelligence packets, and congressional procedural handbooks I'd been collecting for weeks. Every page, every line was ammunition. This time, I wasn't moving through hostile terrain in Kandahar or Sinaloa. I was navigating something even more treacherous: Washington bureaucracy and military politics. But I knew how to wage war in the dark. I submitted an official petition for reconsideration of the Medal of Honor, this time through the Congressional Special Review Committee, a rarely used but legally binding route that bypassed internal Pentagon blocks. My appeal included everything: mission footage, satellite overlays, biometric data field citations from 3 separate units, and a personal statement signed by Lieutenant General Voss, now retired, who had commanded the Southern Theater when I neutralized the Al-Hadi chemical stockpile. But that was just the beginning. With the help of a military attorney willing to risk their career, I compiled a whistleblower dossier against my father, General Frank Doyle. It documented a pattern of favoritism, personal interference in commendation pipelines, and active suppression of my file, under the guise of insufficient transparency. I had dates. I had signatures. I had witnesses. I had been quiet my whole career. But now I was going to speak, and I would speak through process. The petition caught fire in the back halls of Capitol Hill. Senator Carolyn Reeves, a veteran herself and a known advocate for women in the military, took interest after reading my redacted submission. She requested a private briefing. I walked into her office in full-dress uniform medals, sharp collar, high ribbons earned but unrecognized. I saluted. She didn't ask for pleasantries. She asked for truth. I gave it to her. Every mission, every omission, every block my father had put in place to keep me invisible. Her brow furrowed. She folded her hands and said, "This isn't just about a medal. It's about a system." Exactly. Within a week, she had convened a bipartisan preliminary inquiry, citing unusual suppression patterns in commendation routing involving high-ranking relatives. My father was not named, but the implication was clear. I still remember the look on the clerk's face when I filed my whistleblower report at the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General. It was quiet, almost reverent. "You sure you want to go through with this, ma'am?" he asked. I nodded. I've survived worse. It wasn't personal. It wasn't about revenge. It was about record. And records once entered into history become legacy. The invitation arrived in a crisp manila envelope stamped with the Department of the Navy's seal. It wasn't an order, but it carried the weight of one. Inside was a formal request for a decorated special operations advisor to observe and consult on an upcoming SEAL selection round at Coronado. There was no name on the request, only Colonel R. Doyle, Office of Strategic Joint Command. It was perfect. They didn't know who R. Doyle really was, and I wasn't going to tell them. When I stepped off the chopper at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, the morning air was thick with fog and salt. I wore civilian tactical gear, no rank, no insignia, just credentials in my back pocket and a neutral expression on my face. I kept my hat low and my voice lower. From the observation deck, I watched as the candidates moved through the obstacle course. Barked orders, sand-filled boots, sweat-soaked uniforms. Their muscles strained, their faces cracked, but none of it was unfamiliar. I'd been through worse in terrains they'd never pronounce correctly. The officers gathered on the command line were all men I knew by name, though they didn't know me. Not truly. My father stood at the edge, clipboard in hand, flanked by Commander Seth Willis, SEAL Team Evaluation Chief. They were laughing at something, probably at one of the rookies who failed to clear the cargo net. "Colonel Doyle, would you care to offer any insights?" asked the selection coordinator beside me. I nodded. "Not yet, but I would like to run one set." He blinked. "You mean go through the evaluation?" "Yes, on the range, just one run, rifle course." He hesitated. "I'll check with Commander Willis." I didn't wait for permission. I moved toward the weapons table like I had done 1,000 times in my life. The M14 lay in the center standard issue for marksmanship evaluation. I picked it up. My fingers knew the grooves before my eyes even registered them. And that's when I heard it, a familiar voice. "And you are my father," snapped from behind me, as if sensing something off. I turned slowly. Name? Asked Commander Willis. R. Doyle, I said plainly. Willis laughed. You don't belong. The line of instructors chuckled in agreement. I said nothing. I stepped to the firing line, chambered around, and exhaled. The moment my finger pulled the trigger, the silence hit like a wave. First shot center. Second shot split a playing card taped to the target. Third dead center of a moving clay. I heard a gasp. Someone muttered she just broke Larson's record. Then came the final shot, an off-angle ricochet that shattered two distant sensors no one had ever touched. I lowered the rifle, took 2 steps back, and set it down without a word. Someone reached for the clipboard. Commander Willis turned to my father. She just broke every record we have. My father's face paled. I didn't look back. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I had done what I came to do. They laughed before, but now they stared. And they didn't even know who I really was. Not yet. They didn't know who I was when I shattered every SEAL record. But the silence that followed those shots didn't last. It never does. By nightfall, murmurs had already begun to circulate inside the base. Who was that woman? Never seen her on any SEAL list. Where'd she train? She called herself R. Doyle. Same as that Black Ops file name, people don't like voids. And silence. It invites curiosity, especially in a place that breeds hierarchy, record-keeping, and suspicion like oxygen. I had planned to slip out just as quietly as I had entered, but fate, or perhaps irony, had different ideas. The first crack came from a young enlisted Marine who worked logistics and had once served forward ops in Kandahar. He spotted the Raven tattoo on my forearm when I reached to sign my departure form. He froze. Ma'am, did you ever serve with Task Unit Delta 19? My pulse tightened, but I kept my voice flat. No comment, but he had already seen too much. The black ink, the stylized raven with a broken wing and a single red eye was not standard. It wasn't even regulation. It was legacy. It belonged only to one unit, Shadow Raven, a unit that officially didn't exist. A unit I had helped build, lead, and shield from public knowledge. A unit responsible for missions that had never been confirmed, including the one that saved 200 lives during a hostage rescue deep in Kandahar province. By morning, that Marine had spoken to 2 others, and one of them had a brother who worked in defense journalism. 2 days later, my email pinged with a request from the Washington Sentinel. Dear Colonel R. Doyle, we are preparing an investigative feature into covert rescue operations in Afghanistan, particularly the 2017 incident near Kandahar, which resulted in the safe evacuation of over 200 civilians and Allied personnel. We have reasons to believe the operation was led by a figure known only as Shadow Raven. Would you care to confirm or comment on the connection between this identity and your name? I didn't reply. But the floodgates had opened. Online forums lit up. Photos from the SEAL range started leaking grainy, low-res screenshots of me holding the M14. Blurry or not, they caught the tattoo on my left forearm, cross-referenced with older photos, scraped from a declassified training brief in CENTCOM's archives. Someone posted side-by-side comparisons. And then they found the match, a tactical command, still from helmet cam footage leaked years ago but never identified. The figure's face had been blurred, but the patch, the gait, the rifle stance, it was me. Within hours, hashtags like Totr Shadow Raven, per SEAL Ghost, and Who I Saw Doyle were trending on military Twitter. A speculative Reddit thread dissected my shooting stance and linked it to a series of irregular medal citations across different branches, many of which I had quietly facilitated as team leader, always under aliases. Then came the biggest breach. Someone posted an anonymized after-action report detailing the Kandahar operation never before seen publicly. And in the corner, an embedded signature, R. Doyle Commander, Task Unit, Delta 19, codename Shadow Raven. The press went into overdrive. CNN requested an interview. Fox News labeled me the real American sniper, who nobody knew. Veterans groups sent thank you letters to the Pentagon. A congressman from Virginia called me a hidden hero, finally stepping into the light. I wasn't ready. I had kept my identity secret for 2 decades for a reason. I believed in the work, not the glory. I had chosen invisibility so I could keep doing what mattered and survive it. But now the mask was slipping, and somewhere deep in D.C., my father, General Thomas Doyle, had already seen the headlines. already read the same Reddit threads, already connected the dots. The same daughter he had dismissed, the same soldier he'd erased from award nominations, was now being hailed as a myth come to life. And the world wanted to know more. But I still had one move left. And it would happen not in whispers or behind black tape, but in the full light of day, before the eyes of the nation. Because sometimes, to rewrite a legacy, you have to let the truth stand naked in the storm. I had stood in jungles and deserts, walked through enemy fire, led men and women through hell and back, but no battlefield had ever felt like this. The invitation arrived 3 weeks after the SEAL Range incident went viral. It came not from the Pentagon, but the Naval Officer Training Command. A formal letter embossed with gold trim, Colonel Reagan Doyle. You are hereby invited as the guest of honor and keynote speaker at the Naval Commissioning Ceremony for the graduating class of SEAL cadets to be held at Fort Stratton Base. Your presence is requested to deliver the honor address and present the Excellence in Valor Award to the top performing recruit. It was signed by Rear Admiral Clifton Grant, who notably had once served beside my father. I stared at the envelope for hours before deciding. If I walked onto that stage, I wouldn't just be stepping into the light. I would be confronting the shadow of a lifetime. The ceremony was scheduled for noon on a warm spring Saturday. Fort Stratton's Hall of Honors held about 500 people, officers, graduates, journalists, and family. The broadcast would be streamed live on military networks and rebroadcast later on national television. I arrived early, not in camouflage, not in my old combat boots, but in full formal uniform, silver eagles, black gloves, service ribbons except one. The Medal of Honor, still pending, still withheld. As I waited backstage, I scanned the printed program. There it was under keynote speaker COL, Reagan Doyle, U.S. Army Intelligence Command Operation Shadow Raven, declassified my name, my title, and at last, my truth. The stage was set with a lectern flanked by 2 SEAL honor guards. Behind it hung a massive Navy flag and the seal of the Department of Defense. I recognized a few faces in the front rows, brass from every branch advisors, even a former defense secretary. And there, 3 rows back in his full-dress uniform, was my father, General Thomas Doyle, flanked by my brother Connor in a freshly pressed lieutenant's coat. Neither of them knew. The MC's voice echoed from the podium, clean and practiced. And now, to deliver our keynote address and present the Valor Award, please welcome Colonel Reagan Doyle. The name rang out like gunfire in a quiet room. My father's shoulders stiffened. Connor blinked confused. I stepped out from behind the curtain. Silence, complete and profound. One officer's pen dropped. Someone near the back gasped. A reporter's camera clicked once, then again, as if no one could believe what they were seeing. I walked with measured steps to the podium. My boots didn't echo, they landed like hammers on the legacy they had denied me. I glanced toward my father. His jaw was clenched, his knuckles white around the program booklet, his face drained of color. Connor's eyes flickered with recognition and shame. I cleared my throat. My voice, when it came, was steady, unshaken. Good afternoon. I am Colonel Reagan Doyle. For over 20 years, I served in operations too classified to name. I led missions that left no signatures, saved lives without parades, and honored my oath when no cameras were watching. I am the daughter of General Thomas Doyle. Gasps, audible. I let that truth settle like dust over a war-torn field. I was also the commander of Task Unit Delta 19, codenamed Shadow Raven. You didn't know because I wasn't meant to be known. That was the price of protecting others. A price I paid alone. The audience was frozen, locked in a collective state of disbelief. My name was scrubbed from citations, my deeds attributed to ghosts. And when I submitted my Medal of Honor nomination, I learned that my own father struck it down. I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. The weight of those words did the work for me. This ceremony isn't about revenge. It's about truth. About the quiet soldiers, the silent leaders, the daughters who rose when no one believed they could, and the ones who kept rising, even after being erased. I turned to the recipient of the Valor Award, a young woman barely 22, standing at attention with sweat on her brow and tears at the edge of her composure. Ensign Hope Keller, you exemplify what we protect. courage without ego, leadership without applause. Wear this medal not because it makes you a hero, but because you already are one. Applause broke like a thunderstorm. I handed her the award, saluted, and stepped back. And for a moment, I let my eyes meet my father's. He didn't blink, didn't smile, but for the first time in my life, he didn't look through me. He saw me, and it burned him. I never imagined the moment would look like this. The Pentagon's rotunda was filled to the brim, rows of high-ranking officers, civilian dignitaries, decorated veterans, and media personnel. They had gathered for one reason: to witness the presentation of the Medal of Honor to a soldier known only through classified files and redacted briefings. For most of them, R. Doyle was a code name, a mystery, a myth wrapped in encrypted reports, until now. I stood in the green room minutes before the ceremony began. I adjusted the collar of my uniform, my ribbons neatly aligned, my boots polished to a mirror shine. My hands were steady, my heart was not. Outside, the announcer's voice filled the hall. Today we honor a soldier who served in silence, a tactician, a leader, a woman whose actions saved hundreds and inspired thousands, yet whose name until recently remained unknown. Please welcome Colonel Reagan Doyle. There it was, my name, spoken publicly, clearly, without hesitation. I took a breath, then walked. The doors opened, light poured in, and every eye turned to me. I moved through the center aisle, past generals with chests full of medals, past men who had commanded wars. And yet it was my steps, measured, deliberate, that felt like they shook the marble beneath. I mounted the stairs, turned to face them, and then I said the words I had waited my entire life to say. My name is Colonel Reagan Doyle, and I am the daughter of General Thomas Doyle. Gasps cut through the room like shrapnel. I let it land. Let the weight of that truth settle on the shoulders of those who once looked through me. For over 2 decades, I served under a different name. I chose anonymity not because I lacked pride, but because I was born into erasure. I paused, then scanned the crowd. My father sat in the front row, straight-backed, expression unreadable, but I saw it in his eyes, the tremor beneath the armor. I submitted a Medal of Honor application under the name R. Doyle, complete with confirmation of identity and eyewitness reports. It was denied, by a man who has denied me my entire life. I looked directly at him now. I didn't waver, I didn't flinch, but today, that ends. I am no longer invisible. I no longer need permission to exist. The room was silent, so silent I could hear my own breath. This is the first time I've been introduced by my full name, the first time I've walked onto a stage not as a ghost, but as myself. I reached toward the velvet box on the podium, opened it, and saw the Medal of Honor, bright, still, silent. The MC stepped forward to officially bestow the medal. I stopped him with a glance. With respect, sir, I'd like to do this part myself. I cupped the medal in my hands, held it up for all to see. This is not just for me. This is for every woman who was told to be quiet, every daughter who fought twice as hard for half the recognition, every soldier whose truth was inconvenient. The applause started as a ripple, tentative, unsure. Then it swelled. Hands clapped, feet stomped, and finally someone rose to their feet. Then another, and another, until the entire rotunda stood. I lifted the medal higher. My hand didn't shake. This is who I am. Not because I asked for acknowledgement, but because I earned it. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I smiled. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. In that sea of uniforms and polished brass, amid the echoes of cheers, I caught sight of my brother Connor. He wasn't clapping, but he was crying. And my father. He remained seated, but he lowered his head. And that was enough. The morning after the ceremony, my name was everywhere. Shadow Raven unmasked, the hero in Black Ops is Colonel Reagan Doyle. That was the headline plastered across every major paper, every military blog, every defense-focused news segment. My photo, taken mid-salute with the Medal of Honor still around my neck, spread faster than any mission report I'd ever filed. They finally saw me, but not everyone liked what they saw. I was invited to a dozen interviews. CNN, Stars and Stripes, the Military Times. They all wanted the same thing: the face behind the ghost. the woman who had commanded black ops missions in silence for years, only to reveal herself on the most public stage imaginable. For the first time, I was referred to by name, not Sir, not Commander Shadow, not the unknown, Colonel Reagan Doyle. But for every voice that celebrated me, another one questioned my motives. One anonymous article from a retired colonel read, "Heroism doesn't require a stage. If she served in silence for 2 decades, why seek recognition now?" Feels like a vendetta disguised as valor. Another broadcast hinted was the medal awarded for service, or spectacle. It stung, not because I needed their approval, but because their words echoed the very culture that had made me hide in the first place. My inbox was flooded. Former teammates from ghost units, soldiers I'd mentored, even survivors from rescue missions I led. They sent messages of support, admiration, and gratitude. One said, "Ma'am, I never knew your name, but I'll never forget your voice in my earpiece the night we escaped Kandahar. Thank you." And yet inside the Pentagon, whispers grew louder. Some questioned the legality of my declassified reports. Some hinted that by filing formal accusations against my father, I damaged the chain of command. A few outright claimed I had shamed the institution. But I didn't flinch, because what they called shame, I called sunlight. I knew there would be consequences. The military doesn't like its walls made of glass. Still, a senator from Virginia called my speech the most necessary disruption of the decade. A decorated Marine general posted, "It's about time we acknowledge that valor has no preferred gender or last name." The debate on Capitol Hill reignited discussions about gender bias in military honors. A subcommittee was formed to investigate all Medal of Honor nominations denied due to insufficient public merit. Suddenly, it wasn't just about me. It was about every soldier like me who had been overlooked. But while the world buzzed outside inside, I was still navigating the silence of my own family. Connor didn't reach out. Not a call, not a message. And my father. He remained publicly silent. But I heard from someone inside his office that he'd cleared his schedule for 2 days, locked the door, spoke to no one. Let them sit with it. Let them all sit with it. I had spent a lifetime swallowing silence so others could remain comfortable in their power. Now it was their turn to sit in the discomfort of truth. Still, I reminded myself I didn't do this to destroy anyone. I did it to be whole. To walk into any room not as a myth or mistake, but as Reagan Doyle. And as I watched headlines roll across screens and reporters argue about protocol and pride, I sat alone in my apartment, medal resting on the table, a cup of coffee cooling in my hands. And I smiled, because this time I didn't have to hide. I didn't expect the disciplinary board to move so quickly. But within 72 hours of the ceremony, the news broke Admiral Doyle under internal review for procedural bias and obstruction of military recognition. He didn't show up to work that morning. He didn't answer calls. According to insiders, his office was raided quietly, of course, to protect appearances. They took files, emails, directives. They reviewed board minutes from every medal nomination committee he chaired over the last 10 years. I didn't need to be told what they found. I already knew. He had buried my name. And probably others too. The press started asking questions. Some painted it as a military shakeup. Others framed it as the fall of a legacy family, the once praised admiral now overshadowed by the daughter he tried to erase. But I didn't relish his downfall. I simply watched. 2 days later, Connor showed up. Not at my apartment, not with an apology. He found me on base outside the gym, where I still trained alone before dawn. His boots scraped the concrete awkwardly. His uniform was too crisp, as if he had come prepared to defend his image, not seek truth. I didn't stop my reps, but I looked up. He hesitated, then spoke, voice low, almost rehearsed. I didn't know it would go this far. Those words hung in the air like smoke. This far, as if justice was a crime. As if my life, my identity, was an inconvenience that had spiraled out of control. I stood, wiped my hands, met his gaze, but I did. There was no fury in my voice, no scream, no accusation, just truth. His mouth opened, then closed. He didn't know how to argue with certainty. He only knew how to navigate silence, shame, and scripted loyalty. He tried again. "You should have told me," I shook my head. "Would you have believed me?" Or would you have run it by Dad first? He flinched. That was answer enough. He looked down at the floor, shifting his weight, searching for something to anchor the moment. I thought we were on the same side. I didn't laugh, though the irony was sharp. We were. Until I realized I was standing behind you, not beside you. Silence. Then Dad's been demoted. His tone carried no grief, only fact. Like it was a weather report. Like he hadn't been shaped by that same man's shadow his entire life. They reassigned him to administrative review. He's off the command track. I nodded. That's between him and the system. Connor finally looked at me, really looked. There was something fragile in his eyes. Maybe regret, maybe confusion. So what happens now? I folded my arms. Now I keep doing what I've always done. I serve, I lead. I don't need a family name to validate my worth. He blinked. Are we done? A question heavy with years of misalignment. I answered without pause. We never even started. And I turned back to the gym, not out of spite, but because I had no more words left for those who only listened when the world forced them to. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no apology, no attempt. That was the real silence, not the one they forced on me, the one they now had to carry. I left the military quietly, no retirement ceremony, no farewell salute, no speeches carved with polite fiction. Just a signature, just silence. The same way I came in, the same way I fought, the same way I chose to exit. The official paperwork listed 21 years of honorable service, and while that was true, it didn't begin to explain the weight of what those years contained. It didn't mention the identities I wore, or the people I became, or the truths I buried to survive. I didn't leave because I was bitter. I left because I was done. I had nothing left to prove, no more hunger for validation, no lingering need for the approval of a structure that had once erased me willingly or blindly. What they gave me in the end, a medal, applause, headlines, could never undo what had been denied. But I never wanted retribution. I wanted release. I didn't announce my retirement to the press. There were requests, interviews, profiles, documentaries. People wanted the real story of Shadow Raven. They wanted footage, a feature, a name to associate with every operation I'd led in silence. But I declined. I didn't want to be remembered for what I did in secret. I wanted to build something in the open. 3 months after I stepped down, I opened the Doyle Center for Veteran Women. Not in D.C., not in Manhattan, not near any power hub. I chose Colorado. Quiet mountains, resilient forests, unpretentious people. The kind of place where healing feels less like a statement and more like a breath. The center wasn't just a facility, it was a lifeline for women like me. For those who wore uniforms in war and came home to invisibility. We provided tactical retraining, mental health care, legal advocacy, and more importantly, space. Space to speak without judgment. Space to cry without shame. Space to lead again, this time on our own terms. I didn't put my name on the building. Just the mission built for those who fought without applause. Some of the women who walked through our doors didn't know who I was. Others had pieced it together. They'd whisper, "Is that her?" But they never asked directly. I preferred it that way. I was never after legacy. Only purpose. Once a younger veteran asked me in passing, "Don't you hate him for what he did? For what he denied you?" I thought about it for a long moment. Then I answered no, I forgave him, but not for him, for me. Because hate is a chain. It keeps you tethered to the thing that broke you. It keeps the wound alive, pulsing, waiting for validation that may never come. Forgiveness wasn't permission. It was freedom. He never reached out again. Neither did Connor. I didn't expect them to. I had let go of needing an ending from them. Sometimes there's no redemption arc, no reunion, no mutual understanding, just facts and choices. My choice was peace. Every morning, I train with the women. I teach them the drills that saved me. I watch them relearn trust, not just in others, but in themselves. I watch them carry each other the way no one ever carried me. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed in longer, if I had used my new visibility to climb higher, speak louder, push for reform. But then I remember impact doesn't need to echo to be real. One woman came up to me after her graduation from the center. She had been homeless, addicted. Her discharge was labeled other than honorable because she reported a superior's abuse and was punished for it. She shook my hand, tears streaming, and said, "You gave me back my spine." I didn't answer. I just held her hand and nodded, because I knew exactly what she meant. So no, I don't chase microphones. I don't give TED Talks. I don't sit on panels about women in combat as a headline grab. I just keep showing up, every day, in silence, with strength. They call me Colonel still, but here it means something different. Here it means survivor. It means guide. It means woman who made it out and stayed to hold the door open. Some nights I sit under the stars, no uniform, no rank, no mask. Just Reagan, finally allowed to exist without permission. And in those moments, I remember forgiveness is not weakness. It's the sharpest weapon I've ever carried, and the most healing one I've ever used. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the training field. The sky had that deep amber tint that only autumn could summon, soft, quiet, reflective. I stood near the edge of the range holding something I hadn't touched in years, my old M14. It was heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I had just become lighter. I didn't plan to shoot. I only came to clean it for a display case at the center. But the moment my hands wrapped around its worn walnut stock, I felt a familiar pulse in my palms, an echo of who I had been. One of the trainees, a young woman named Elena, approached hesitantly. She had sharp eyes and a quiet fire in her gut. She reminded me of myself 20 years ago, before the scars, before the silence, before I learned to bury my victories. She looked at me, then at the rifle, then back again. "Colonel," she said, "can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Why didn't you go further?" she asked. "You could have humiliated them, made them kneel. You had the chance to destroy everything they built." I looked at her for a long moment, then I smiled. It was the kind of smile that doesn't need teeth to cut. It was quiet. Complete. "Because I didn't need to," I said. "I won the moment I stopped needing to prove I belonged." She looked confused. And that was okay. She hadn't lived the years yet. Hadn't carried the weight of secrets, the hunger for acknowledgement, the fatigue of fighting battles just to be seen. "I used to think revenge would fix me," I continued. "That if I could break them, the world would balance itself. That their humiliation would erase mine." I looked down at the rifle, running my hand over the worn leather sling. But then I realized something. Breaking them would never build me. It would only mean I'd become them. Elena stood in silence. I could see the gears turning. She was trying to understand a truth that didn't feel fair. And she was right. It wasn't fair. But it was real. I forgave him. I added, my voice low but steady. Not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. She exhaled long and slow, then asked almost in a whisper, "And are you really at peace now?" I looked back at the center. The laughter of other trainees echoed faintly. Someone had started a round of pull-ups on the iron bar rack. The air smelled like pine oil and faint traces of gunpowder. I had no medals on today, no rank patches, just a simple gray sweatshirt, my sleeves pushed up, a woman with weathered hands and a clear spine. "Yes," I said, "because now I live without pretending." She nodded. Then she offered her hand. I shook it. Firm, level, like an equal. Later that evening, I placed the M14 inside the center's glass case. Next to it, I left a small card. No name, just 5 words. Carried with honor, fired with truth. I stepped outside as the sun dipped behind the ridge. Shadows blanketed the field, but the sky held onto its last gold threads like a promise. It had taken me decades to arrive here, not just at this place, but at this version of myself. The one who no longer needed to be louder, stronger, more impressive to matter. I mattered because I existed, because I survived, because I stayed whole when they tried to slice me into silence. And now I was free, truly free. Not because they gave me anything, but because they no longer had anything I needed. Before I walked away, I turned back to the field once more, and for a fleeting moment I imagined the girl I once was, 12 years old, trembling in her father's shadow, clinging to the hope that maybe one day he'd look at her and see someone worthy. I closed my eyes. "You were always enough," I whispered. "You just needed time to remember." Then I smiled, and I walked into the fading light, not as a colonel, not as a daughter, not as a shadow, but as Reagan Doyle, exactly as I was always meant to be. They tried to forget me. They removed my name from the manifest, the plaque. The stories passed around like shared cigarettes in bunkers and foxholes. They scrubbed me out of documents like a stain, thinking if no one spoke it aloud, then maybe my worth would vanish too. But you can't erase what you never created. And if you're watching this, and you've ever felt the same overlooked, underestimated, cast aside by those who should have stood beside you, then let me tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. No one gets to define you, not your father, not your commanding officer, not your bloodline, not a committee of men in ironed uniforms who measure legacy in medals instead of integrity. You are not what they refuse to see. You are what you fight for when no one is clapping. You are the discipline you upheld when no one noticed. You are the story you keep alive inside you even when everyone else forgets the words. I've been called everything: stubborn, emotional, disruptive, too loud, too quiet, too much. But they never called me wrong when the mission succeeded. That's what I want you to hold on to, because one day someone will try to write you out of your own story. Don't let them. Don't shrink. Don't sit down just to make others comfortable. And if the only place you're recognized is in the mirror, stand a little taller. That reflection deserves your respect. My father once told me that forgiveness was weakness, that letting go meant surrendering to the people who tried to break you. He was wrong. Forgiveness is not a pardon for others. It's a gift you give yourself so you can walk away without dragging their chains behind you. I was denied a childhood. I was denied recognition. I was denied the warmth of family. But the one thing they couldn't take from me was my choice to end the war inside my own body. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, someone who was supposed to protect you, believe in you, raise you into your worth, I need you to hear me now. You are not alone, and you are not broken. You may carry bruises, but you are not the damage. You may carry memories, but you are not the pain. And you do not owe your silence to people who have never earned your voice. Speak, write, stand. Even if your voice trembles, even if the room goes quiet, even if the ones who hurt you are in that room. Because when I finally spoke, the world didn't explode. It paused. And in that pause, I became visible. Forgiveness didn't make me weaker. It freed me. That's why I built a life where I no longer need to fight just to breathe. I built a space for women like me, women who served, who sacrificed, who returned home without applause. We train, we heal, we laugh, we remember. And when the time comes, we rise again. I carry the same tattoo I had before they knew my name, the same mark that showed up on satellite images and intelligence briefings long before anyone connected it to a woman named Reagan Doyle. A raven wings spread carved into my skin, not for glory, not for revenge, but as a reminder you can forget my name, you can question my place, but you will never deny what I've done. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to ask, where are you watching from tonight? Are you on your porch letting the breeze remind you you're alive? Or curled in bed searching for voices that still believe in courage? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this story reached something quiet inside, you consider subscribing. Not just for more stories like this, but for a community that believes in truth, in healing, in reclaiming what was taken. Thank you for spending your time with me. Wherever you are, I hope this story stays with you. And if no one has told you lately, you matter. You are not invisible, and you are never too late to begin again. Sometimes the miracle isn't loud. It waits for you, just as you are. Until next time. This is Colonel Reagan Doyle, and this was never just my story. It was always ours.